Hi there, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Vice President of Solution Strategy here at Regalix, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I want to welcome as my guest here today, Rob Russell from Resort Income Optimization, a digital marketing platform. And I want to welcome you, Rob, to this series, which is our Digital and Marketing Leadership Series. So thank you for joining us, Rob.
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. It's a pleasure.
So, Rob, I'm calling here from Boise, Idaho, where we all wear bow ties. But where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from Atlanta. There's a few bow ties here as well, and the weather's great.
That's beautiful. So, Rob, thanks for joining us today. Now, I want you to share. So you're the CEO and founder of Resort Income Optimization. How did you get involved in that business as a digital leader?
Yeah. Well, the business was started back in '99, actually, by a charter airline that was flying a lot of people from Atlanta down to the Caribbean. And they decided to help them out with some of their digital distribution as well.
Oh, wow. So how did you get involved in it?
Yeah, well, I've been involved in international business for several multinationals and doing a lot of digital marketing and technology for a few years. And a couple years ago, I decided I wanted to kind of strike out on my own, and I purchased the business. So I've been kind of working on it for a few years, but it's great. It's a great business. We've since expanded a lot beyond the Caribbean, and the charter airline that originally founded the business, they spun it off, and it's a great standalone business. And we help a lot of hotels around the world who don't necessarily have the resources, that a lot of the big chains do.
So let's jump in. Let's just jump right in with both feet and say, what problems are you solving for these resorts?
Yeah. Well, the short answer is we help them optimize their revenue, right? And, that involves, getting better rates and also occupancy. And, as with any sort of economic supply and demand, right, when you raise your rates, your demand or your occupancy or your sales can tend to go down. So in the hotel business, which has a lot of fixed costs, you need occupancy and you need reservations. And so you do need to strategically, manage your pricing out into the future so that you can make sure you fill up all of your rooms. So we help them optimize their rates and their occupancy. That can get pretty complicated with all the different travel channels, right? There's a lot of third-party channels where people buy travel like Expedia and Booking.com and dozens of others, right? And all over the world, especially with resorts, they are marketing themselves to travelers that are all over the world, and even though they are small. So we help them distribute the data and the occupancy correctly, right? A given room type, only has a certain amount of supply. You want to make sure that all of those marketplaces are showing a supply that you actually have, and showing availability of rooms that you have for certain dates or certain room types. So all of that is data that is constantly changing, right? And on the rate side as well, these are usually seasonal businesses, and there is a seasonality when you look out 300 or 400 days into the future, and people book travel that far out. So you have to have rates out into the future, and they vary by season. And then, of course, as your occupancy changes, you also have to adjust those rates, right? If your occupancy is super high during a certain period, you may have an opportunity to raise rates. If your occupancy is really low, then you need to do promotions and maybe lower rates. And, all of that is to kind of optimize your overall revenue. There's also kind of a marketing side to that, which is really making sure that all of these websites have excellent photographs that are high quality and really convey the experience well, and prompt a guest to book. So there's a whole marketing aspect there as well. There's also direct booking technology, which is important to have on your own website because those sales are commission free. So from a revenue and profitability standpoint, getting that right is really important for smaller independent resorts.
Wow. So that's your target market, the smaller and independent resorts?
Right. Yeah. They tend to be sort of, on the low end, maybe 10 rooms up to 100 or 150 rooms. I think once they get a little larger than that, they have full-time people. They can afford to have a full-time revenue manager or a full-time IT person, that sort of thing. So they don't necessarily need, someone like us to provide those services. But below 100 rooms or below 150 rooms, very often it's not really feasible for them to hire that kind of expertise in-house. Or many times a resort is on a small remote island or maybe up in the mountains somewhere. And those kinds of resources and people and expertise may not be locally available.
Wow. So how did you personally develop the skills because this sounds like a very I can imagine that a lot of resort expert at running a resort, but all of this digital technology that's fast evolving, all these new and different platforms, the new requirements and all of these things that are involved out there, boy, that's a lot of complexity, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Well, my background was really kind of suited to it. And over time, I think the business and a lot of the people in our company have also developed that fairly unique mixture of talents, right? And it is a blend of technology and marketing for sure. And, it's something that I've always had a passion for myself. And, also sort of, a lot of the international issues as well have always been of great interest to me. So it is a blend of skills that is somewhat unique, and it gets even deeper than that. So, for example, we have very deep knowledge of some of the big channels like Expedia, for example. It takes pretty good knowledge of what exactly do you do in Expedia to get a high ranking for your property, right? It's a little bit like Amazon or Google, right? There is a science and perhaps an art to getting your property ranked high. When somebody searches for a hotel in your marketplace, you want to be near the top of that list, right? If you're on the second or third page, you may never even get a look or a consideration. So there are a lot of tricks and expertise that comes into getting a good placement there and getting good visibility in those channels. So, some of the bigger channels like Expedia and Booking.com, they have unique characteristics, and we're, experts in each of those channels, and getting a hotel to rank high in the search results is a somewhat unique expertise as well. I think, on the direct booking side also, is another area that requires expertise in perhaps user interface, right? You want your website fairly simple to use, and you want to allow people to book whenever they want. You always want to enable the transaction. And a lot of, pure technologists are not necessarily focused on the user experience. And a lot of pure marketing people are not always focused on the important technology pieces. So that blend is really important to converting whatever traffic you get to your website. Really requires you to put yourself in the user's shoes and make sure that it's easy for them to land there, find out about your property, and then as soon as they are ready to make a transaction, you need to make that as simple as possible. And that's not always easy, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm thinking here as you're speaking, and I'm saying, okay, I could see this can be done with a room full of people that are expert in those areas, or you can do your best to try to automate as much of this as possible. What's that mix look like for you?
Yeah. So I think a lot of the automation comes on the back end for our hotels. And, a few years ago, a lot of hotels were still managing each channel individually and separately. And so one big piece of automation that's, I guess, relatively new in some markets is something called channel management. And, these are software applications that, these are software applications that they plug into all these different marketplaces via XML. And they allow you to put in your rates and your availability for all your room types and manage all of that complex information in one platform. And then they push rates and availability out. And then also, very importantly, they bring back reservation details as well as payment details. So all of that information has to come back in from each of those different marketplaces and then get sent to the hotel. So there's quite a bit of automation there. I think another area is, there's in the hotel industry, there's something called a property management system, which, really helps them manage all of their individual rooms. And it is also kind of the ultimate source for reservations and bookings and all of that and guest information. And so you also want to be able to quickly see your revenue picture and your occupancy and metrics in the industry, like revenue per available room and things like that. And so there's revenue management software as well that will just automatically pull data out of that property management system, and you can log in and get a fairly quick picture of how your bookings are looking in the future, maybe compare that to last year, and then decide if you need to make a change, if you need to adjust your rates, and that sort of thing. So there's some automation there as well.
Yeah, so talk to me about that interaction. I mean, do they just give you access to those tools on their that they use on premise, and you log in and look at all that, then help them manage that? Or do you have some additional platform where you're doing analytics, looking at competition and looking at all that, and then suggesting to manage themselves?
Right. So it's a little bit of a blend, and it does depend a little bit on the hotel situation. So each hotel might be a little bit different, but very often we do log into their systems, and we, cloud computing is a big game changer in that sense, right? And a lot of these cloud applications can be accessed with a browser, with a username and password. And so sometimes we log into their systems and manage it for them, right? And we act as a revenue manager, which is, in the hotel business, that's a position that is very often on site and a full-time person for bigger hotels. And so we log in from anywhere in the world and, kind of take a look at their occupancy and their bookings and maybe resolve problems with specific reservations. We manage their account on third-party sites like Expedia and Booking.com. And then we also log into their systems and manage those. We do have some software providers that we partner with, and we are specifically very knowledgeable about those. And so if they need those systems, then we usually try and offer them 2 or 3 different options, and then we'll install it for them as well and connect those systems together, because there is kind of a chain as well, right? So on all the way at the end is kind of the consumer facing piece, which might be a booking engine or perhaps these third-party sites. And then that data comes back into the channel manager, perhaps, right, which, manages all the different channels. And then that connects into a property management system, which is really where they receive the bookings and assign specific reservations to specific rooms, and where they charge the cards and all of that. So these systems need to be connected. So in some cases, they've already got the systems and they're all connected, and we log in and advise them that way. In other cases, we kind of tell them what they might need and maybe connect some new systems.
Got it. So that's kind of on the management and the revenue management. But talk to us about the marketing side now. I mean, do you have to get involved in all kinds of social media and Instagram for a particular resort and all those things as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge, growing issue for a lot of hotels, and it's something we're trying to help them with as well. And especially as we've kind of built them some direct booking engines, right, and integrated those booking engine technologies into their website, and then even maybe built them a website around that transactional engine, then they're saying, well, okay, now how do we get people here, right? So you know, we have several people, including myself, that have a lot of background in search and social media marketing, and so we help them do that as well. And you know, search is still very important in the hotel industry, but it has become very competitive, and for many smaller resorts, it has become very expensive. It depends on the price of that resort. So if it's a very expensive place that charges $800 or $900 a night, you know, their average reservation might be $3,000-4,000 perhaps, and they can afford to spend a lot on search terms that are expensive and convert well. But other hotels that may be more moderately priced, you know, their average reservation might be $700 or $800. And so some of that search marketing becomes quite expensive, especially for the better, more frequently searched terms, right? Instagram and social and Facebook, a lot of the visual social media is extremely important as well. A lot of people, when they go on a trip, they are posting pictures while they're on the trip or when they get back, and they talk about it with their friends and family online, on Facebook, on Twitter, and in all sorts of places. And that's, you know, that's kind of the referral side of it. In many cases, it really starts, you know, at the top of the funnel, right? People start thinking about where they want to go. They might see an ad for a particularly beautiful place. You know, a lot of people share, you know, videos and pictures of beautiful places they haven't even been to, right? But they end up sharing that, and then somebody else sees it and it inspires them to say, hey, I want to go there. And then they start doing some research and looking into it, and eventually they book a hotel, right? And so being present in all of those channels in a really thoughtful way is really important for hotels to be able to get those direct bookings.
Oh yeah, you know, Rob, I see that myself. If I'm going to a city I've never been, you know, I'll check on the visual social media, right? I will look at Instagram and Pinterest. I will look at YouTube, and I'll try to look at the most, you know, fun, interesting neighborhoods. And then I use those photos and those videos to then go back and read up on that area. But first I want to see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Right. And there's also, you know, the photos that I think are most important very often, but there's also narrative, right? People write about their trips and people read about the experiences. And so those are also pretty important as well. And you know, if a hotel is at the top of the funnel, you know, they might get some direct business there as well.
All right. So you've been in the industry or around the industry for some time now. What digital impact have you seen in the travel industry? You know, I can think back to the first time I started going back and forth to Europe. You know, I would go to a library, I'd open a book, I'd see a fax number, I would fax a request. It would come back in, you know, half German, half English kind of thing. They would send me an application. I'd fill out it and say, here's the dates I want to reserve, fax it back to them with my credit card number. So everything has changed since those days of faxing and reading from a book at the library. How have you seen it change just over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's dramatic. You know, I mean, we kind of joke about faxes, but there are still some travel agencies that use faxes, and so some of that does still go on, but it is phasing out very rapidly. And you know, a lot of this automation also means that hoteliers do not always have the opportunity to engage in dialogue with their clients, right, or with a potential guest. There's not that many people that just pick up the phone and call and ask questions, and then the hotel has the opportunity to, you know, identify an ideal solution for them, answer questions. So they have to be really, really thoughtful about pushing out all of the right information, making sure that it's out there in all these different places in a well formatted, well thought out way that presents their property well. and they can't really keep track of it. Some of it is a time constraint, right? A lot of hotels just don't have the time to be checking all of these websites, and some of it is expertise as well. So many hoteliers, especially in the smaller resorts, they are very much people, right? They like to engage with people in person, and they like to be hospitable and that sort of thing. And when you're posting pictures and content out there on the internet, and you don't know who's looking at it, or you don't even know if a person had trouble booking their room with you, you might not even be aware of it. And so a lot of hoteliers are kind of in that space a little bit, and they don't know really how to reach lots of people, or they don't know what's going on out there. Are people having a good digital experience with their hotel or not? And that can certainly hurt their revenue as well. So, there is a mindset, and digital transformation, I think, is huge and very evolved in a lot of the big global hotel chains, right? They are kind of at the forefront of many industries, I think, in offering great digital solutions. Also with mobile, for example, I was heavily involved in mobile in the early days of that. And from the very beginning, the largest mobile commerce transactions were hotels and travel, right? People started to actually buy thousands of dollars of travel on phones. And the hotel industry was at the forefront of that. There were many other industries that were not, and maybe still don't sell that much on mobile phones in some industries, but the hotel industry does. So I think the large global chains are really at the forefront of that. But I think there again, these smaller resorts of 80 or 100 rooms, they are still pretty good sized businesses, but they don't always have the resources to compete in mobile commerce, or have a mobile app, or let's say have a loyalty program or something like that, which are really big assets and tools for the big chains.
So, Rob, do you get involved in creating a mobile app for those kinds of target or those kind of customers?
No, I mean, we do have that ability, and we've kind of thought about it. But I think in most cases, it doesn't always make financial sense for a smaller hotel to have their mobile app. Now, there are a few cases where it does. We typically don't build that, but we can advise them on what should be in the app, and what kind of experience they should create in the app. I think with smaller hotels, what we found is that what tends to make more sense economically is an app that enhances the experience while they're on the property, right? And those are relatively inexpensive to make, and can enhance the experience for guests depending on what kind of property they have. And it really connects them to all the different aspects of the hotel, maybe room service, or maybe sightseeing nearby. And so that is more feasible. On the other end of the spectrum, in terms of generating revenue and bookings and marketing, a lot of consumers are booking on mobile, and they book. They tend to be mobile web instead of a mobile application, right? So, for example, the booking engines that we install on their website, and their website has to be mobile optimized. And there are still many, many hotels that have a website that is not mobile optimized, which, as many of us know, that will greatly reduce your ranking in Google and so on. But many hoteliers are not necessarily familiar with that. And so they have a website that is not optimized for mobile, and they might have a booking engine that's not optimized for mobile. And so there is technology now, and it's cloud-based technology. It's fairly easy to deploy, and we help them do that. So we help them have a mobile site and a mobile booking engine so that consumers can land on their site and find it and book from a mobile device. Similar thing with third-party sites, Expedia and Booking.com, and a lot of those large players. Their mobile app is very important, and so we have a presence there, but it's kind of through them, right? They're kind of like retail.
So Rob, have you got involved in adjusting prices dynamically when there's distressed inventory For example, there's a massage table that you want to charge 125 for, but it's open. Nobody's booked it. So you send out kind of a real-time message to all the guests saying, the price was this. There's a 40% discount between 11 and 1 today. Do you get involved in that kind of thing?
Well, we haven't, but it's certainly all possible. I think most of the hotels we deal with on the smaller side don't necessarily have that real-time visibility, and we typically work with the general manager, and they're not necessarily aware of it either. So they don't necessarily have a system that shows them bookings of some other services. We do get involved maybe in promoting the restaurant if they have a restaurant on site. Again, some of these smaller hotels may not even have a restaurant. But yeah, I think that restaurant reservations within the hotel are also the kind of thing that might go on a mobile app, because it's similar, right? There's availability and occupancy, and they might push out a special. If there's very low bookings for a particular night, they might offer a special for dinner.
Wow. Okay. So one of the other big trends that we all see out there are these, the sharing economy. So you see things like the Airbnbs. How do you see that impacting your particular market?
Yeah, that's been a huge impact. And I think in the last year or so, it's accelerating and it's really changing even more. And so I think a lot of what's happened in the last year specifically is that Airbnb has really started to ramp up their inventory of hotel rooms. So if you go on Airbnb now, a lot of what you see there are actually hotel rooms. They might be presented a little bit differently, or sometimes there are hotels that have, for example, kitchens, and they might be a little 2-bedroom suite with a living room and so on. And it may look like an apartment, but it's actually a hotel room. And so a lot of hotels are doing a good job marketing themselves through Airbnb, whereas I think a few years ago, Airbnb was 100% competition, and may still be for some of the larger hotel chains, right? But for smaller boutique hotels, I think they are a channel for distribution, and they are a cheaper channel. So without naming too many names, the commissions that you pay on Airbnb might be 3 or 4% instead of 15, 20, 25%, which you pay in other channels. So that is a huge difference. Yeah. And so, the hotel owner gets to keep a lot more of that revenue through Airbnb. Now, there are some additional complexities. So, for example, you can't necessarily manage all your room types in large volume in Airbnb. It's designed for individual apartments and so on, right? So I think Airbnb is trying to figure out how to evolve as well, to accommodate those needs. The other thing about Airbnb that's a little tougher is the communication. So the consumer on Airbnb is a lot more mobile, more millennial, and they want almost constant communication. And with other channels, that's not necessarily the case. So from a hotel perspective, you have a lot more engagement there. It is more time consuming to be dialoguing with that guest before the trip, during the trip, after the trip. So it does take a little bit more time from that perspective, but it's good business. I think the other flip side that you see there is that a lot of the online travel agencies, right, the large booking sites like Expedia and Booking.com have they've purchased a few of these home sharing sites, VRBO and HomeAway, and now they are starting to include those home listings in their hotel listings. So, in certain markets, if you go and you search for a hotel, you won't just see hotel rooms, you'll see individual apartments and hotels as well.
And Rob, just last week, I was on Marriott's website in a city, and it gave me as an option an in-home experience.
Yeah, I think that was just launched like a week or two ago, actually. I think I saw an announcement on Facebook or something like that, right? But yeah, I think that's starting to blend. So I think the large hotel chains are starting to kind of figure out how to compete in that space. there again, I think for the smaller resorts, I think it's a little bit of an easier decision. It depends if it's more of a pure hotel, which is sort of just a room and a bed. It's not necessarily quite as good. It's still a channel they should be in. But if your units are, a little bit more apartment-ish, and you have kind of a kitchen and so on, then it's an excellent fit. And so yeah, those channels are starting to blur a little bit as well, and I think that's probably only going to accelerate.
Oh yeah. So Rob, I can think back, if I go back even 30, 40 years, hotels would compete with technology like magic fingers, where you could put in a quarter into your bed and it would vibrate the bed.
Right.
And they would compete, and they would put that on their signage out at the street. We have magic finger beds. That was their technology innovation.
Right.
Today, it's companies and hotels and resorts are still competing on technology, but I read recently that it's much more on how fast is your internet at that resort. Do you hear that same thing?
Absolutely. That is critical. And I'll tell you where it's even more critical is in overseas travel. And in places like the Caribbean, where we have a lot of clients, Wi-Fi is it's oxygen almost to a lot of people. And the challenge is that depending on your mobile carrier in the U.S., when you go down there, if you don't buy into certain plans, you could have a very expensive cell phone bill. And so Wi-Fi becomes your way to call anyone, to check out websites, to do local research. So Wi-Fi and the internet connection is really important at these resorts. And of course, once you get on some of these calling apps, you can call anywhere in the world via Wi-Fi for free. And, consumers are, widely aware of this, especially if they travel overseas.
So now I could just see a developer would look at a piece of land, and the first question he would say if he wants to build a resort is, can I get enough internet into this location? And then once you have that cable, you build a resort around the cable.
I can see that happening as well. I mean, I think it is that critical. It's like electricity and water and other things. Yeah.
Oh, very good. So in wrapping this up, Rob, where do you see the industry, travel and hospitality, moving from a technology standpoint? Where do you see it moving over the next 3 years?
Well, I think, a lot of these channels are only going to become more important, at least in my world with smaller hotels. They are still just scratching the surface of what they could or should be doing in social media. So that is going to accelerate. Same thing, search, I think, is going to continue to become expensive. One of the interesting things that's happening is that search and social media are starting to also merge a little bit with the booking engines and some of the transactional websites. So you can take your booking engine and embed it in Facebook or embed it in search results. And, when you do a Google search for hotels in XYZ, then you'll see an ad type that is specific for hotels. And that ad unit shows check-in, check-out date. And so from the consumer standpoint, they almost feel like they're booking a hotel room on Google. Now, it is the direct booking engine behind that. And Facebook has some similar integrations. So I think there's going to be more and more of that kind of integration. And, TripAdvisor and other websites have similar things. So I think a lot of that is going to continue and accelerate. I think social media is also, going to be very important for visibility and advertising. More and more, though, I think it costs money. And so a lot of these smaller resorts have kind of thought social media would be free, or at least take a lot of, just hard work and sweat. But increasingly, they have to pay to get real visibility there. So I think that's also something that they're going to have to come to terms with. And the other thing, as these channels change and evolve, right, you can invest a lot in getting people to like your business page, but then the Facebook algorithm can change, and then it costs you money.
Oh, yeah, there you are.
So I think they also need to invest in their own proprietary assets like email. Email is still critical for many industries in marketing, but especially in this one where reservations and all of that is done via email, and so they can build up an email database that can become very valuable. The Airbnb home sharing, I think we've already talked about that, but I think that's only going to continue accelerating. And automation as well, connecting all these systems, for smaller hotels, there's still a long way to go there. And then, kind of the last thing I'll mention, which is a little bit further out, is blockchain technology. And so, when people think about blockchain, if they know the underlying technology, it's much more than Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin, there are hundreds of other cryptocurrencies, right? But they're not really currencies. They're just transmitting data back and forth between two parties. Some of them are even called simple contracts and so on. And so what that means for the hotel industry is that, for example, Bitcoin just says that I'm sending and you're receiving $100. Those are, few data points. But a hotel is receiving check-in date, checkout date, name, email, all sorts of other details, payment information that might be a credit card and so on. So blockchain technology has the potential to really, increase the automation and efficiency of this whole ecosystem. But we'll see. It's too early to tell how that's going to happen, but there's that potential.
Rob, you've been brilliant. I mean, truly, we have experts on this show all the time, but your willingness to just share your experiences, your wisdom, your insight, your perspective is invaluable. And especially just talking about digital transformation and how it looks from your perspective in supporting those small to medium-sized resorts and hotels around the world. So, Rob, if somebody wants to reach out to you and talk to you about your service, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. I mean, rob@resortincome.com, and you can reach me there. There's, our website is resortincome.com. So, there's plenty of ways to reach us, and we're out there on social media and other places as well.
Okay, Rob, why don't you say your email one more time? You broke up right in the middle of your email.
Okay, it's Rob, R-O-B, @resortincome.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you, Kevin.